Hello again. Uh, so this presentation is called the Modular Back-to-Back House, an Interactive Generative Methodology for the Design of a Lifetime Home. I don't need to introduce myself because maybe if you were here earlier, I presented a paper earlier. But this takes a similar approach in terms of the previous paper. It looks at the way in which we can use algorithms and generative design to generate ideas and particularly ideas relating to societal issues. So affordable housing, lifetime housing. So let's look a little bit about the background of housing in the UK context, specifically in relation to affordability, specifically in relation to kind of lifetime homes, or when we look to stay in our home and adapt it rather than moving to a different house or looking for new houses that are built. So we look at ways in which we can adapt and resolve, which have sustainable values as well as financial positive impact as well. So as you can kind of see on the right here graph, quite an interesting graph, which goes from 1922 on the left to 2018 on the right, and it talks about the relative breakdown of who's been building houses, and quite kind of amazingly, you can see there the dark blue is the local authority building of houses, or what we might say government or state housing being built, and that obviously went really high post-war. The white line is the war, so it went high post-war after lots of houses were destroyed. But then you look into the kind of 90s in the UK, where it almost dipped down to zero, and what took over then are private housing associations, which took over from the government. But just look at that private kind of construction. So what we're seeing, as well as kind of problems in relation to affordability, we're also seeing a reduction in the government proposed and funded housing schemes that reduce the profitability of housing. And it's not just kind of the way and method of procurement of housing, it's also issues in relation to affordability. So quite a stunning few graphs here. So we, on the left, I suppose, we're talking about the kind of younger people, 25 to 34, who, if you look at the kind of dark green, it's the dark green versus the light green that you're actually looking for here. It just shows you in all sets of life, from kind of low earners to high earners, the dark green has come down quite significantly to the light green, and what that is percentage of ownership of housing from 1995 to 2015, so over 20 years basically, and it's come down in some cases up to 30%, so 30% fewer people in that age group own houses. And I think a fundamental part of that is, if you look at the issue over inflation, so the graph on the right looks at the way in which average net family income in terms of salary has remained pretty similar in the last 20 years. It hasn't really seen in the UK the inflation that some other countries have seen. Salary hasn't been indexed with inflation as accurately, but what you see in the blue line is actually house prices going up massively, so percentage of growth over time, nearly up to 200 in 2006 when we had the property boom, came back down during the recession, and 2017 it's creeping back up again. So we've got this pressure of the government not producing state non-profit housing. We've got affordability because salary is not indexed with inflation. So there's a big housing crisis currently, particularly for younger groups of people. So it got me thinking, okay, well, how could we solve this? How could we provide affordable housing? So I kind of thought back, looked into historic means of building, particularly back-to-back houses. Now, back-to-back houses have received quite significant criticism in terms of the standards of housing, in terms of sanitary provision and heating and those kind of things. But what it did quite well is it created kind of very close-knit communities, and it was also relatively sustainable in terms of its approach. It shared quite a lot of material because everything was so close. Obviously, it shares walls, back-to-back house, it shares walls between each other. So thermally, it was very efficient. Tectonically and in terms of materials, it was also pretty efficient as well, because the amount of material used in relation to the numbers of people living in the spaces was really, really low. This is an example of kind of one of the layouts, and obviously it's quite kind of packed. It's very, very kind of efficient in terms of its approach. It's incredibly dense, and it just shows you some of the back-to-back housing. This, for example, I think is in Holbeck, yeah, in Leeds. So lots of the back-to-back houses, which are basically how, and I'll show you in a little bit, but they were basically built in the north of England for families who couldn't necessarily afford improvements to their existing housing. So these are kind of council built, state sponsored housing. And the concept and why they're called back to back, I suppose, is that literally it's one house which is on the back of the other. So there's no garden at the back of the house. It shares a kind of core wall. And often they would share kind of an adjacency as well to buildings. So in the plan here that you see on the left, these are the literal divisions of the walls in the houses, and these are the planned divisions. So actually what you get is 8 houses in that block. Now obviously in terms of space standards, that was very low, but what I think I was quite interested in is not necessarily the kind of smallness of space, but rather the process and the density, which could be achieved in a more positive way, which takes into account the benefits of sustainable approaches and shared living and community living. So in terms of the research proposal, what we were looking at, or what we proposed, was that we effectively build half a house, so half of that kind of back to back. So a developer would build, a half house, and what that would do is it would give young families or people who are struggling financially a single house to live in within a specific area, but towards the back of it, it would retain that space for the owner. So it would mean that in future years, in the lifetime of the owner, if they were to have children, or if they were to change their jobs, or if they were to get a car, that space could then be built upon to extend out relative to the life changes of the owner. So as I said before, maybe the owner saves money over time, and then they can save up to build out and build up as well. So fundamentally, that was the approach with the research proposal. It's if we were to build one house and to build a space where you can have lots of different configurations of an extension, how would you go about that? What would you do? And I think a really important part of it was this concept of lifetime homes. So the fact that a home can really be a place to live in for life if it retains sufficient flexibility. What that does is it reduces the requirement to build new. So what we're trying to do as architects, if you see the RIBA Way Ahead report, and obviously the latest statements by Biden and Johnson, we're really looking to cut down on new builds. So this really is a kind of solution for adaptation, renovation for existing families. So conceptually, what we looked at then is how to, so a little bit similar to the paper that I produced earlier, how to change configurations and how to play around with configurations. And I guess in terms of this process, what the objective was for the research was to provide the homeowner or the person purchasing the house with much clearer future financial planning capacity. So the idea of the research was that the owner would be able to project 10, 15, 20 years to say, well, what would it cost me if I had one child in 3 years' time? What would it cost me if I had a car in 5 years' time? What would it cost to have a garden in 20 years' time? How would it change the cost and the renovation of the house. So working on the base build, which is on the left, which is the initial building that the homeowner moves into, the concept, as I said before, is that the future phase, which is shown on the kind of green on the right, can be built in subsequent years if life changes happen. So on the drawing on the left, it says like 1 and 2. So 1 is the base build. So the ground floor is a basic kitchen and stairs going up. And at the back, there's a kind of garden area. First floor, a living room, bathroom, some storage, but there's no room next to it. So it just looks down on the garden below. And the second floor, the same. It's a single bedroom and there's no space. So you just kind of look down into the garden above. And then we theorized, okay, in a future phase, which is the phase 2 below, and if you look at the green lines, that's like a speculation on what it could transform into. So for example, ground floor, the kitchen has been enclosed now, and a large living room has been built where that existing garden was. On the first floor, we've introduced 2 bedrooms where there was a void above the garden before. So the couple have had 2 children. And then on the second floor, a smaller bedroom has actually been put into the kind of base build, and a garden on top of the kids' bedroom has been placed there. So this basically exemplifies or demonstrates is that there are lots of different ways to configure this building subject to the individual's lifetime approach. So how did we go about doing that? So we looked at the idealized layouts for very small or kind of dense homes. We looked at the back-to-back approaches in terms of the way in which circulation worked, which actually is quite clever when you look at it. And then we came up with as many configurations that we thought worked as possible in terms of this really, really quite close and dense space. So the base build, and then the builds in the extension to the other side, or the future extension. So we came up with 71 possible iterations for ground floor, 84 possible iterations for first floor, and 71 possible iterations for the second floor, which I think, I hope, comes around to 423,444 options. Now, not all these options are valid. So for example, you wouldn't necessarily want a house with just like 6 bedrooms in them. That'd be totally rubbish. So within the 423,000, there's obviously kind of some dud options coming out there. So not all of them are great options, but what it shows you is the kind of range and width of choices that could be available in this approach. So similar to the last project, this time I used a different software though. I used Dynamo, which is a Revit program. And in terms of the approach, or in terms of the framework, what we did is we drew all of these plans basically. We put them into the Dynamo model, which would then generate a series of advantageous outcomes based on the timeline of what the homeowner thought they could do or might do. This would then generate a visual output, so the owner could see, what those 2 bedrooms might look like, how the garage might work, where the kitchen might be. The client then chooses the preferred option. Those quantities are the quantities of material that are generated from the changes or alteration of the house are taken into Excel directly, and that outputs a kind of total cost. So what it is effectively is a means of quantifying what would happen to your house, or how alterations to your house what they would cost you basically. So it's a way of future planning and future cost planning for houses. And I suppose in terms of the software, it kind of looks a little bit like this. So as a screen, so these are all options. That's the kind of parallel coordinates point comparison at the top. So all it does is kind of compare iterations of outcomes, and obviously with 470 odd thousand, it's all down to what the house owner thinks they will do, and it can compare things like in relation to total area, in terms of storage, in terms of kitchen size as well. So there are various really kind of detailed configurations that that you can go into. And of course, fundamental to that is ensuring that this isn't just a visual methodology, that it's based on kind of cost as well, because it's a tool for future planning. So we linked it into the SPONS Architects and Builders price book as well. So the great thing about, and the reason why I use Revit, is because it's a great building information modeling system as well. So it can extract quantities very easily and place them, into an Excel file very easily. So it can automatically and very, very quickly give you a price for, say, a lifetime change almost instantly. So it's almost not meant to be a one-off exercise. So you wouldn't expect a homeowner to do this once and then go away. It's almost like a tool that the homeowner has for the duration of the house, a little bit like a digital twin, whereby they can use it as a little app to say, okay, we've just found out that we're having another baby. What's that going to cost us in terms of the house? So it's like an ongoing thing. In terms of the results, what we did is we kind of got people, we asked six individuals to speculate on what their future lifetime might be. So in terms of what we did, we then generated those 6 outcomes in terms of the houses. So for example, this graphic is the kind of 6 houses in a block. So participant number 6, at number 6, a multi-generational family have added a living room and 2 bedrooms. So you can see there on the graphic, on the top floor, they've added a kitchenette and living room to the bedroom to give their grandparents some privacy. So putting that in, the £70,000 base build, and then there's an additional £23,000 lifetime alterations. Obviously, there needs to be consideration in terms of inflation as well, which we did take into account, but this is estimation. It's very difficult to get precise future costs, but obviously we can speculate and try, and it helps future planning as well. So number 5, they extended and adapted their roof space into a living room to take advantage of the terrace on the 2nd floor, and the 1st floor is all bedrooms. So £65,000 base build, £15,000 lifetime alterations. Number 4, have added a living room and 2 more bedrooms costing £32,000, so £75,000 base build, £32,000 lifetime. Number 3, they've added 2 children's bedrooms at 1st floor, and they park their car underneath, so £68,000 base build, £15,000 lifetime. The owner of number 2 has built a home office, nice, on the ground floor, and a roof terrace on the 1st. £62,000 base build, £10,000 lifetime. And the couple at number 1, they're like a first-time buyer, effectively. So they bought half a house, and it was constructed by a small-scale developer. So they've only paid for the cost of the base build, £60,000, and obviously they have 0 lifetime alterations because it hasn't been altered yet. And I guess in terms of what we've done, I guess the methodology proves that, in essence, the approach can work. I think there's still a lot of work to do just in terms of getting the detail out, I suppose, of how comparable are the financial outputs to real world outputs. And I think that's been a slightly difficult thing, but it's been great to be able to come up with a vision as to how a methodology might work. And I think as well, it could work as quite an interesting social experiment. So that's an actual visualization of the space in the middle of these kind of back-to-back half a house things, which we envisage as a truly community space as well. In terms of future work, the project has gained some interest. So we are looking to use or test the methodology on something called Belridge Garden Village, which is just south of our university in Lancaster. So that's 3,500 homes. I'm not saying that this methodology will build 3,500 homes, but it might just work towards, you know, testing it out and getting some data on it. And as well, we've been approached speculative by Lancaster City Council because they're doing some housing in the city centre canal quarter as well. So there are lots of things, I think, hopefully that will come from it, but that's me. Thank you very much.